Good morning and welcome to the forum. My name is Malcolm Clemens Young. I'm the Dean of Grace Cathedral. It is such a pleasure to have all of you here today. Every year we have a special theme. Our theme in 2019 is the body. And as soon as I thought body, I thought hula. As soon as I thought hula, I thought Patrick Makuakāne. During January, we hosted the San Francisco Movement Arts Festival with hundreds of dancers performing short works throughout the cathedral. It was amazing.
Next time, call us.
I know, we will. During our mini arts festival, Spacious Grace, we hosted a Daybreaker dance party, and ODC Dance Company's sold-out Path of Miracles, which was choreographed especially to be performed in the cathedral.
Wow.
But today we're going to talk about a dance that is close to my heart, a dance that is in many ways a language of the body and an integral part of a rich culture, the hula. Our guest today is a choreographer, dancer, and director of one of the largest hula schools in the world. I didn't even realize that.
Me too.
He is passionate preserver of traditional hula and also has reinvented the dance form, incorporating just about every genre of music. He has won many awards and honors, including the San Francisco Arts Commission's Legacy Award last year. He also serves as the spiritual advisor for the Native Hawaiian religious spiritual group at San Quentin State Prison. Please join me in welcoming Patrick Makuakāne.
O kavena ulai ke au mahala malamo kamahala ma mai lau kalama ku mai kama malo kale huai ka wa o hu vali kanoi ka pa na ko lau o hia o e ku vehi li le hua wa kau ke ha hai kaluna ulu vehi o kala I mai o na le hulu ka vehi aloha
Aloha.
All right.
And
look at how nice he is. He stands up for that.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful.
Mahalo.
When Heidi and I went on our first date, we went on a walk together at the beach, and she taught me my first Hawaiian word that I learned from her.
Which
do you know what it was? Ka'ehukai.
Ka'ehukai. Wow, that's a hard first word.
You
didn't start with aloha. Ka'ehukai.
I know, it's tough
that's
stuff.
Amazing. It is.
And I remember saying, tell me about Hawaii. And it was the most magical introduction to that world. No. And I wonder if you could help us just kind of understand Hawaiian history a little bit, and maybe you have like one or two words that you might think are important for us to know.
I do. Boy, this is like, I could go on and on. Where do I start from? Actually, I'm going to start from your two words because there's so many to choose from. And one of my favorites is kahiao. Kahiao. And kahiao is a word that means to give lavishly without the expectation of return.
That's grace. That's what grace is.
Right.
That's exactly the same thing.
And for me, I've been so fortunate that I have had many mentors and people in my life who have done that for myself, given me so much. And as best as I can, I'm trying to return to other people who are important to me in my life, and a few unimportant ones. But, so kahiao is really, really a special word. And also another word that I love is kuleana. And kuleana is really a term that's used often in Hawaii, and it means, simplistically, it means responsibility, what you're responsible for. But I kind of think of kuleana as something that's unique to what you can do that makes the world a better place.
Yeah.
So all of us have kuleana. Some of us take care of our parents. You're with a family and somehow there's one child that sort of takes care of the parents for whatever reason. That becomes that child's kuleana. Some people, their kuleana is to make rice every night for dinner. All important things. And it's important to contribute what you can to the ohana and to the community, and to always recognize that this responsibility is also a privilege as well. So,
it's funny. I hadn't thought about it until just now, but it's in ways like dharma. It's like your calling. It's like what you're meant to do.
Right.
You know?
And so people have asked me in interviews, so do you feel that your kuleana as a kumahula, as a hula teacher, is to ensure that hula evolves, because I do, I guess, modern work, very contemporary work with hula as well as traditional. And I never felt that was my kuleana, that was my responsibility. Something happens as you pass 50. It's like things open up for you. And what I discovered is, what I would say my kuleana is, is to create a healthy, loving environment for your community.
Right.
And if you have a community that is sustained by compassion and aloha, a little bit of discipline.
Yeah,
You
gotta have
can
it.
really achieve a great deal of things. So that's what I feel my kuleana is.
Yeah, definitely. And
Like you.
Right?
Similar to you,
Completely.
right?
Exactly. It's a very similar. And when we talked about your work at San Quentin, I mean that's your ministry. I mean, and it's
Oddly
built into
enough,
your,
yes.
you know,
Yeah, right.
oddly
Yeah,
enough,
right.
exactly. But maybe you can talk a little bit just like about what hula is. It just kind of almost like from King Kalakaua to now. I mean, what stages has it gone through?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I have a new answer to what hula is because I get asked that.
Yeah, I bet all
quite
the
a bit.
time, completely.
Yeah, so and I give the pat answer. Well, hula is it's a way to describe poetry. It manifests the words into gestures, blah, blah, blah. I can say it without even thinking about it. My mouth is just going, but I want to stop doing that. And so here's my new answer. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, it's kind of a long, involved story, so hopefully you get an idea of what it is. This year, I took the entire halau to perform at Burning Man.
Oh, yeah,
Which
right.
was just beyond my wild expectations. and
I'm
it
going to
almost
go with you
killed
guys
me.
next time.
You
we
have
go.
to.
I'm going to go with you.
Yeah, don't tell me that
Yeah.
and not go.
No, I already been once.
All right.
I'm going to go.
Okay,
go
because
again.
when somebody says that to me,
Yeah,
I
no,
take
I
them
wanna
at their
go.
word. You
Yeah,
have the
I gotta
highest
get my
integrity.
tent
All right,
all
you ready?
cleaned up and ready.
Yeah, okay.
How do you come to?
Yeah, of course. So we were there and we performed in front of the temple, which is this really amazing structure that they create every year. It's different, where people go to express their grief, to commemorate the loss of someone.
I wrote my uncle's name on the temple wall. It was
It's
really
beautiful,
powerful,
right?
yeah.
It's very powerful. It's a very powerful experience. And at the start of Burning Man, you see a few things like posted here and there, but by the end, it's just it's so much memorabilia. It's all
Yeah,
over the place.
exactly.
Right, very powerful.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I wanted to perform about 100, 200 yards in front of it to be respectful, but also I wanted to honor that place and what it
Right,
stood for with
exactly.
our performance. So after our performance was over, I met a photographer who came up to me. He said, "Hey, I'm from Hawaii, and when people from Hawaii meet other people from Hawaii, you instantly think somehow you're related."
You probably
So-
are.
Well, he's from Minnesota, so maybe. But my mother is from Philadelphia. So I said hi, and he said, "Oh, I took some shots of your performance. I'd love to share them with you." And I said, "Great," because I didn't get a photographer. He gave me his card, and I said I would call him later when I got back home. And now at Burning Man, I lost everything. You could never find anything that you wanted, right?
agree.
So how I managed to hold on to a business card, I don't know, but I did. And a few weeks after we returned, I contacted him and said, "Hey, I met you at Burning Man. You said you took some pictures. Just wanted to know if you have anything to share." And he sent me an email back, and he said, "Yes, I do. And here's the link for you to download your pictures." And I was just about to click on it, but then there was like 5 paragraphs after that. I was like, "Oh, do I read that first? I want to see the pictures." That's right. I'll read it. He begins to explain to me that because we had a brief conversation after the performance where I said that a really dear friend of mine, who I first came to Burning Man with, he was murdered.
Oh, wow.
It was
I'm so
really
sorry,
traumatic.
Patrick.
Thank you. It was really traumatic for me. And he said that he also came to Burning Man to commemorate a friend who he recently lost. And he told me a story about how he was taking pictures on the rocky coastline during sunset, and this guy passed him with his fishing pole and said, "How's it?" I'm like, "Hey, nice to see you," blah, blah, blah. And the guy went down. And like about 5 minutes later, he heard a scream for help and a splash, and he went down there, and the guy had fallen off the cliff into the water. And he tried to get him, but the guy had sunk below the water before he could do anything. He called emergency services. They came. They were unable to retrieve him. They found his body like 2 days later.
That's terrible.
Yeah, and he was really traumatized by the whole thing. So he was looking forward to coming to Burning Man to go to the temple to have some kind of release.
Right, right.
So there he was, he's taping his picture, writing something sweet to him and crying his eyes out. And then all of a sudden you heard, "Is that Hawaiian chanting that I'm hearing? How could that be, right, in the middle of Burning Man?" Followed the sound and discovered our performance. And it was like, there's a full-on hula troupe here at Burning Man. So he was bedazzled by it, and he began to take pictures. And he said that throughout the performance, he just found it very touching and moving that he was able to release a lot of his grief, and that he felt that it healed his soul. And he went on and on about it, and I'm crying reading the email, and my partner in the living room is like, "What's going on in there? Are you crying?" So then I clicked on and saw the pictures. I see a lot of pictures of my dance company, and most of them, they're okay.
Yeah.
But these were just phenomenal. It was sunset, and the sun was behind the mountains, and the glow and the light. There was some kind of essence that he caught in those photographs that I've never seen before. And I was completely blown away. So that, Malcolm, is hula.
That is hula. That is hula, exactly.
The idea of using the natural environment to tell your story, you know, and to weave it into a memorable event for your friend, to portray grief, which is very real, happiness, and remembering that the sun does shine again and things will be okay. And it goes on and on, history and commemoration, as I said. So for me, hula is, I'm still learning about it, and it's healing as well.
Right.
When people tell me that they're not feeling well, or death of a family, something has happened where they don't feel like coming to class, I always say, come to class.
It's even more important.
Right. Be with your community. You know, take that in. So that's hula. It's the sort of extension, the opening a dimension into a culture, and to be able to, out of all the disciplines, of course, because there are many in Hawaiian, you know, canoe, paddling.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that.
Right, but of course,
'Cause we're the big
hula
canoe
is the
paddlers.
best, because when you get to dance your culture, there's nothing for me more special than that.
Yeah. Well, what was it like? I mean, like, what are your early childhood memories of it? Like, you know, how did it first, you know, what did you, I mean, because the Hawaiian Renaissance is going on.
Right,
I mean,
and so that was my time, right? The Hawaiian Renaissance
exactly.
in the
You're like the
right, it was
pinnacle
at
of
the
that
apex.
moment.
And I tell
Yeah.
everybody today, you think you young ones know hula. You have no idea. It's all about
Back in
the
the old
Renaissance in
days.
the 70s. But I first became acquainted with hula when I was a young child. My father's Hawaiian, my mother's pure Philadelphian. So it's half and half. But we never really lived in a Hawaiian household. My grandmother, who had 7 husbands, my Auntie Elsie always says to me, but they all died. Black widow, no. But we didn't really live in a Hawaiian household where we learned Hawaiian cultural things.
Right,
you know,
right.
My grandmother was very concerned, like many of her generation, that the only way to make it in this new world was to become more Western.
Right, exactly.
So she stopped speaking the language and whatnot. So we were raised in a kind of local Western home. And it wasn't until I went to Kamehameha School's exploration. Did your
right.
children go to
They
that?
both went
you
there.
Went to, you went, right? And wasn't it great? I loved it. The one class and history, sports, culture.
Did you go to
you
the
stayed in the
Lo'i and
dorms.
everything, and-
No, we didn't.
No, you didn't.
Back then,
They didn't
yeah,
have
you
that.
just stayed in the
Stayed on
campus,
campus,
right?
exactly.
Nowadays, they do so many
Yeah,
great
they
things,
do.
but back then, yeah, it was still kind of primitive. But it was definitely inspirational. But the only class I hated was hula. I didn't like the teacher. He was mean. And, well, at the time, of course, I'm going back and now processing it, but when I was a young 10-year-old, I didn't really have the words to explain that, oh my God, he's gay, I think I'm gay, and he's mean and flamboyant, and that's what I'm going to be when I grow up. And hula is like only for mean, flamboyant people. I was just doing all these really weird things. And the funny thing is, like, I know him today, and I love him, mainly because of his flamboyance.
Yes.
He's
That's
awesome.
Like the
right.
most of it, exactly.
Yes, but at that time I didn't quite understand my own internalized homophobia. So I hated hula class. I would never do it. Then I got into high school and I wanted to join the Hawaiian club there, mainly to learn how to sing Hawaiian songs so that I could sing songs and impress my family at our luau.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I told that to the instructor, and he said, well, but in this club you have to sing and dance hula, and if you don't like it, there's the door. Right, it was like lesson
So who's
number
that?
one.
Who's the teacher?
His name was John Keolalake.
That's
great. He was really, despite that first introduction, he was one of the most warmest, considerate, compassionate man I've ever known, and he is really a lovely, lovely man. But I said, all right, I'll stay for a couple of weeks to see how it goes. I fell in love with hula. It just spoke to me immediately in the first couple of weeks. It really just opened the door to my culture. Come in, and it just began to slowly explain to me everything about the culture that I had never even realized. You know, our sad and tragic history, for one, but how Hawaiians had this really intimate relationship with nature and their environment because they were living on an island. They had limited resources. So many different things. Genealogy, history, it just kept coming and coming. And through hula, I met some really wonderful, loving people, and it hasn't stopped. It still continues.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because I met Heidi's mom at the John Cale Lake Luau.
No kidding, right? Because the family's on Maui, right?
Championship is named after him, and that's where I met Heidi's mother. And I wonder, you mentioned that just like these different like Hawaiian visual arts, paddling, surfing, music, slaki guitar, all those different. And what do you think draws people to each of those different things? Like how is somebody who's drawn to hula different than somebody who's like primarily like drawn to paddling? Or?
Well, you know, that's a good question. I'm not quite sure why people are drawn to particular disciplines.
This doesn't mean you can't do all of them.
Yes,
you know?
and there are people who do hate
yeah.
them. They got to get their hands in everything. No, it's great. But I think what was important about the cultural renaissance in the 70s, and that was actually the second one. The first one was during King Kalakaua time in the 1874, 1891 was his reign. So, but this one, a lot of us at that time, you know, were trying to be westernized, but then the youth in this, what did I graduate, 79? So really from like 75 to like the mid 80s, sort of questioning as to what is our native identity? How do we express that? Who am I? Because I didn't know much about our culture. So it was through music and dance, and then also at the same time they were getting into wayfaring and
exactly,
the hokule and
yeah,
navigation. And from there, it just started to splinter off to different disciplines. And that's the great thing about hula, because if you're studying hula, hula is synonymous with culture. It's just not a dance, because all of the poetry associated with hula talks about navigation and every single discipline you can imagine. So people get interested because of that. I'm always an advocate for saying hula started the ball rolling. Thank you, don't forget. And so from there, more and more people got interested. The language, you can't really understand the mele or the poetry associated with hula unless you know the language. And that started rolling, because that was almost extinct in the 80s until a few people took it up. So from there, it just sort of snowballed. And what's funny is friends of mine back home still think, we're not doing enough, we're so behind. And I say to him, it's because you've been living there for like the last 30 years while I've been here, and so you've been watching it move at an incremental pace.
Right.
But when I come back, you know, it's like, wow, they're doing this now?
Oh,
wow.
yeah,
And as thrilled as I am for everybody, I'm kind of jealous that wasn't available when I was living home. But I think what they're doing right now, especially the kids today.
Yeah, the cultural and language immersion is like, it's just
I think
such
it's the
a
key,
breakthrough.
yes.
I agree.
Yes. And those young ones, they are fearless.
Yeah, it's true.
I'm like so proud of them.
Yeah.
So it's great to see what's happening now. Back
Yeah, it's like it just really gives you hope for the future.
It really does, honestly. Yes.
Yeah, it definitely does. So how did you how did you become a kumuhula? I mean, it opened the door for you, and it was. But I mean, there aren't that many models out there for like how to do this.
Well, that's a good question, and I
feel like you're
faked
kind of,
my way through it until I got it.
You're kind of like a spiritual entrepreneur.
Well, yeah, I never thought of it that way.
That's what you are.
I guess I moved here in '84, and at that time, California was thought as a drunk uncle.
Oh, yeah,
you know, you didn't really have much to contribute to the culture because you were way on the continent, and yet you don't have to dance. All right, do one. Right? So it really was like that. You weren't really thought of as anybody who could really contribute anything significant to the culture. But I'm happy to say that has changed.
Yeah.
But considering that was the sort of opinion of most people, I had studied 10 years before I left Hawaii, and I moved here with Robert Casimiro, who many people recognize as he's an icon now.
Yeah, he's such a part of our life, and through the music.
Right, and that was funny because I came in here and he was playing right in the background, and immediately I thought, oh, Heidi put this on. But later on, he told me
That's the record she gave me before she went away. When she went away to go to Africa.
Yeah,
she
really?
gave me that record.
Oh, that's because it is from the 70s.
Yeah.
You're just like me. I'm so nostalgic. So when I came here, you know, being a student of Robert Casimiro opened the door for me. So I pretended I knew what I was doing. And I sort of worked, studied, and went back home often. And then because you can't claim the title, you can't say
Right,
I'm
completely.
a Kumula.
It's
Yes.
not like me saying I'm going to be ordained now.
Right, yeah. So someone who has that title has to ordain you.
Right, exactly.
So that's what it was for me. So eventually, I did go through a process called an uniki, which is a very regimented ritual process of actually graduating after several years of study through a woman named Makuakāne Klein, Auntie May, we call affectionately, and I'm so grateful to her. And I'm still with Kumu Robert, who sort of ordained me many years ago at the volcano. That's how it eventually happens. And like today, it's a really big thing for people to sort of go through that uniki ritual. Actually, and I'm doing one right now here in California, preparing some of my dancers for it. And we're actually missing class today. They're so bummed.
Right.
Yes, so there's a process now, and people recognize the process. Back then, not so much, but today people recognize everything. Yeah.
So when you got here, like, how did you first start gathering people together? Like, you know, how did that? What was that like in the early days? Like, I mean, could you have imagined what would have happened? What came to later happen after that? You know, first time you gathered people and
right. Well, fortunately, I knew some people already who were looking for a teacher.
Yeah.
So by the time I moved here, there was already like a
Interest,
student body
that's
waiting
good.
to happen.
Oh, that's great.
And there are so many people. I was shocked to discover when I moved to California, there was like this underground system of Hawaiians hanging out and just waiting to latch on into anything Hawaiian that would pop up. So there was a ready-made class for me.
Yeah.
And my partner at the time was really good friends with Robert Joffrey.
Oh, yeah,
The
right.
ballet company,
Yeah, of course.
and his choreographer Gerald Arpino, who happened to have a ballet studio underneath their apartment on Sanchez Street.
Perfect.
So we were able to use that, and it was funny because there's a fee for using it, of course, but I got a discounted rate. And the guy who's the administrator, he would be coming to class and taking his fee from the kiddie. And one day I'm in class telling everybody, "Oh, you can come to several classes. You don't have to pay. Just it's very Hawaiian way." And he's in the back there going.
That's great.
Yes, a little bit of a cultural clash, but it was great to have that studio on Sanchez Street.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then I mean, how did you begin kind of like developing your own style, your own vision for hula?
Well, my teacher, Robert Uluvehi Kazumero, he was also known as someone when he started, he was considered a rebel of hula. He was so good at it because when I joined Halal, that's the word for a hula school, he was maybe like 24, I think, and I was 15.
Yeah.
And he had just been dancing hula for about 3 years, maybe. Right, so not long, but he just was so confident about what he did. I thought that he was in it for years and years, decades. But at the time, he graduated from Auntie Mikey, who's considered the mother of Hawaiian Renaissance. And he, besides being an amazing singer, he was also very creative, and he stylized hula as well as did the more traditional work. And I watched him do this, and it made it really powerful. When I joined Mr. Lake's group at high school, and I loved it. And then I saw Robert's, and he only had a male halal. It's not kamale. It was only for men. And at the time, any man dancing hula was like a man dancing ballet. It was like,
Right.
So to see all these men dancing and looking masculine and athletic, it was, wow, see, men can dance hula. They look so great. And it was really an eye-opener for me. So I asked to join their halal, and fortunately, I was let in. And it just changed the trajectory of my life because of the fact that he did traditional elements, but he was super creative.
Yeah.
And so I obviously stole everything from him. And when I came here, I started adding that slowly but surely into my repertoire. I'm making, a few mistakes, but I did hit a few on the bullseye. Yeah. And fortunately, I think that my greatest gift was, thank you, Tim Gunn, I learned how to edit.
Oh yeah,
because we can use editing in every facet of our life.
Right,
but
it's true.
I really didn't think a lot about it until a friend of mine once said to me, "Oh, it must be so great living up there in California, doing your thing with hula and having nobody looking over your shoulder, critiquing your every move." And I thought, oh, you know what? I never thought about that, but yes, That's exactly why I do whatever I want, because nobody's saying, what the hell are you doing?
I thought a lot about that too, because that was one of the big questions I had. It's just like, just how do you deal with criticism? Because in a way you're preserving a tradition, and
Right.
you're innovating too. And
Right.
and I wonder just how you dealt with that part of it, and what did people say things that hurt you?
I'm sure they did, but it never got back to me.
That's good.
So
I'm
I'm
glad.
sure they were talking. I have this kind of like running joke with the woman, Constance Hale, who wrote our book.
Yeah, right.
Who says,
I
like,
thought she was Constance Halle.
oh, yeah. I call her that all the time. I changed her name. I said, you're a Halle, you're not a Hale. But she always talks about in her interviews how, he really rifled the community, or a lot of people who were upset about the work that he was doing. And I keep telling her, I'm sure that has happened, but I haven't heard from a lot of them.
Right, that's
Nobody
good.
has confronted me personally
Right.
or sent me an email. Of course, a few have.
Yeah.
So
But that's not the dominant story. Like,
Right.
If you preach a Christmas sermon and you get 40 good emails and 2 bad
Right.
ones, you just don't pay attention to the 2 bad
Right.
emails.
Well, Madonna does.
Yeah.
She told me.
Funny.
She can get 100 positive reviews, and
one
all it takes is
bad.
just one.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, I hear more from people who talk about, you must hear from a lot of people, than I actually hear from people who it upsets. But I know that it does. And fortunately, both of my kumu, my teachers, really love what I do. So
Yeah, that is good.
I'm support. Once you have the support of your kumu, your teachers, then
Yeah,
you're set to
completely.
go,
Heidi, you just talk about learning from Auntie Mikey too, just like kind of watching her.
Yeah, Auntie Mikey. I mean, she did a lot for our culture and for hula, so we owe her a lot. And so both of my teachers come from her line. That's the
exactly.
lineage from which we descend. So I'm part of that lineage. I have to ensure that whatever I do, pays homage in a pono way.
Yeah.
So that, because, I also want to honor her and where I came from with Robert and Auntie. So I have to be careful. It's not about me.
Right, completely. But then in the same way, you are that person. Just in the same way that you love and value those mentors, you are
Right.
that person.
Well,
to
yes,
this,
right.
This future,
Yes,
and
right.
and in this place too, where it is. I mean, I love the way you see the glass half full.
Always.
Because there is a half empty element to
Yes,
being
right.
way out here, so far away from Hawaii, and
Right.
you can't just go to UH and talk to the person who's the Hawaiian studies professor. It's,
Right.
it's a long way away.
Yeah, well, fortunately, I do have a lot of friends who are cultural practitioners who are, again, kahiao, just give so much that I can bounce these ideas. Well, who am I kidding? I never talk to anybody. I just do what I want. I leap, then look. No.
Leap, then look.
But yes, people have expressed their opinions, people that I love and trust. So it's been a really amazing ride. And just the fact that we were able to do what we did at Burning Man, for me, that was probably the biggest thing that we've ever done as a halal, to make that happen.
Right.
And it almost killed me, and it will never happen again. But yeah, that was such a highlight.
Oh, I can imagine. And I can just imagine all that goes into it, preparing
Oh,
for all those days,
yes.
all the equipment that you need,
Right.
all the just different schedules. I mean, some people are going to be more helpful, and some people it just sounds like
It's my guys over there who you'll see, we can bring them up shortly, but
Yeah.
these are the ones who we went there early and we prepared everything, and then the women came. Not that the women couldn't prepare stuff,
Yeah.
somehow it just ended up being us, and two other women were with us. But the preparation was in that heat.
Oh,
It
yeah,
was just,
and that dust
in a 200-yard camp.
Oh, gosh.
It was pretty
Yeah.
weary.
Yeah, for sure. But we'd love to see you dance.
Yeah, sure.
So why don't we bring up the guys?
All right.
And then we'll just reassemble after.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, guys. Why don't we start off with Ohana Kahonua, and then we're going to start off with an oli, and then into a dance. And I'll just give a bit of an explanation. This chant is a birth chant for King Kamehameha III, Kauikeaoli, who played a pivotal role as a Hawaiian king. He was the longest ruling monarch. He, at the age of 11, proclaimed, He aupuni palapala ko'u, mine shall be a kingdom of learning, and laid the groundwork for Hawaii. Not many people know this, but Hawaii became one of the most literate nations in the world, over 90% of the population, more so than America, England, France at the time. So he laid the groundwork for that to happen, and he also did something really important without being pressed upon by the people on his own volition, and that was transitioning Hawaii from an absolute monarchy to a constitutional monarchy. And he felt it was very important for the people to have a chance, a say in their government. And by 1842, he also secured recognition of Hawaii as an independent sovereign nation from England, France, and Great Britain. And that was really important because, you know, there in the middle latitudes of the Pacific Ocean, Hawaii was becoming a hubbub for the global community. A lot of people were interested in the Hawaiian Islands. So he secured Hawaii as an independent sovereign nation. Like by the late 1800s, Hawaii maintained over 90 consulates throughout the world. They were the first non-European nation to be admitted in the family of nations. And so that's why it was really devastating for Hawaii to lose their kingdom, for it to be usurped by a provisional government. So this particular chant honors King Kamehameha III, Kawikiaole. It's a birth chant that speaks about him. It ends with him being born as a chief, but it speaks about the sky, the sun, the ocean, waves, everything else, the gods, and how it all eventually came to the birth of Kawikiaole. And the chant that follows, which the men will dance, is a chant that was written for his relationship with a male companion. I guess the word is boyfriend. He was also married to a queen. You don't often see chants written for a king's partner in that respect. But typical of Hawaiian poetry, the chant itself doesn't mention Kawikiaole and this other gentleman. It speaks about him navigating his ship over rough waters and that eventually things will be calm and stable again, and all he has to do is press on and hold tight. And the word for pressing on or pressing hard is kaumi. Kaumi also happens to be the name of his lover. All right. So birth chant first, and then mele hula for kaumi. All right, that's why I'm doing this, right? Here I am, okay. 1, 2. Pa'i. Ohana.
Uhana o ka honua, mole ka honua, o kolo kolo ka akawele o ka honua, o leli no lua o lani, o ya hoi ka honua ha na ka honua. Ha na ka po iluna o lani ha ne ka po ina eve. Oya hoi o ka po ha na ka po o hana u ka mokua kupua laua loa mu o ka liko ka mokula hoi ko la lone o hana kana na u kala o kupano le o ke kukuna kala o ke la o himi ma o ka ya o kala ha na kala Nakamoana, Keauna Naluna, Keo Kekaina, Keo Kaikane, O Kaiwakine, O Koaku, O Kohalelo, Ulunake. O halo wa pukaka nakalahana lilo ilunane o kalani mekamera etahi kalani la etahi olunale o kalani kalane uelua olunane vilila ua mo pa oya pa o kalani o ali olifo kahi ke kapuna e kahi olunale o kalani o kawike aoli olunane Bilila ua mau paha oya e.
And believe it or not, that's the edited version. That chant goes on and on and on. So you're welcome. All right. Okay.
Au hea o e Kawikiaole, ai ai ka moku holo mo ana, pai hoko I maita hoe uli, ke le aku na au pai o ke kai. Au hea o e Kawikiaole, ai ai ka moku holo mo ana, pai hoto I maita hoe uli, ke le aku na au pai o ke kai. Kaomi kaomela Hule luana ale moana ki ai ho aku I hu o tamoku Hikiki mai la ke ki aloloa Ko he ia ho ka hikila Hule luana ale moana pi ai ho aku I hu o tamoku Hikiki mai la ke ki aloloa Ko he ia po ka hikila Kaumie kaumela Hala kuna honolu o lalo Pohua na kua nei Leka ana ai te te ake a Lehola I kai huo ke kai Hala kuna honolu o lalo Pohua na paha o mua nei Leka ana hai te taiake Ali hola I ka e huo ke kai Kaomi kaomela Anoni I mai la hulu o tamanu I ke kahi ko haage o na moku Mali upono kai taula leo O ke lei ke awala I o kou Anoni I mai la hulu o tamanu I ke kahi ko haahe o na moku Mali upono kai taula leo E ho ke lei te awala I o ko Kaumi la Kaumi la kaumi ke kaunu I loko I ho e All right.
Hanoho.
All right. Hi. Sorry, guys. It's kind of fast. I was excited.
That gave me chicken skin. I love that.
Right on. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Oh my gosh. You know, we have a tradition at Grace Cathedral where people write questions on note cards. So there's a little note card, and Rebecca Nessel collects those note cards.
Okay.
But I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of like your work as a spiritual leader. And not just among the people of your halal or the people who are the audiences who experience this, but I wanted to talk a little bit about just what San Quentin and your ministry with people like there has been like.
Yeah, it has been. I have to say, surprisingly so. It's really been one of the most meaningful things I've done.
Yeah.
To be able to give these guys access to something else that they're experiencing at prison.
Yeah.
It's tough in there, and of course, these men, they commit crimes, and there should be justice, understandably, but then they eventually get released, and then what happens, right?
Yeah,
we know what happens. A lot of them return. So, yeah, they do, right? So it's tough. So we need to really work on repairing that and healing them rather than punishing them. You go in there, and they tell you you're not allowed to ask them what their crime was, right? They divulge it in a conversation. That's okay. So you're a little bit curious, right? But I think it was after the first or second week, I didn't even really care.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Because it's just, you don't see that.
There's a human being who is just locked up, completely isolated. And that's what when you come in, this is what you bring. I mean, just that energy, that feeling.
Right, and you don't know if
people respond to
it. If people will respond. Yeah. And so that was my big question, because when I got there first, they did a Haka. You know what a Haka is?
Yeah, definitely.
You know what it is. You've seen it before. A Haka is a dance that comes from Aotearoa, New Zealand, where it's kind of like what you would consider a warrior's dance. It's used to intimidate foes, but it's also considered sacred and special.
Before the rugby games.
Yeah, right. Yeah. They use it for ceremonies everywhere, but it's become rather ubiquitous. It's used in a lot of different sports functions. Yeah. It's part of that I am man, hear me roar kind of thing. It's a beautiful expression of masculinity. And so the guys did their Haka for me, and they were great and passionate, and it was beautiful. And I said to them after it was over how much I loved it, and it shows to me that I have a lot to work with. And then I asked them, I said, if your Haka was a coin and I flipped it over, what would be on this side? I said, you don't have to answer because I'm going to help you find that. Right. I said, that's what's so great about hula is that it gives you access to other places for you to express
other than male aggression and intimidation.
Completely.
Right? And so
That's funny because when you talk about that,
Right.
I think of my son,
Right.
and you're right. He puts forth this,
Right.
and I do know what's behind that
Right.
worry and the self-doubt and
Right.
am I okay
Yes.
and how people are responding to me.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. So I was sort of surprised that they actually did respond to the dance. Usually there's a cultural link. If you're Hawaiian and you're studying hula, that's a way for you to express your identity, right? And it's a lot of people do that, and it's important. And so they have that really deep connection to that. But if you're not Hawaiian and you're in prison, and that dance isn't as cool and rough as Haka,
Right.
how do you draw a connection to that? So I was kind of concerned about it. And the funny thing is, when the style of dance that I grew up for men is you move your hips. You move it a
Right,
lot,
of
and you move
course.
it in every step that you do. And it was really awkward as a teenager to be like,
Yeah.
it's so weird. But then eventually, because your hips master you for about 2 years, and then you master your hips, and then it becomes, wow, yeah, this is the way to go. So I was sort of concerned as to how I was going to teach the guys the hips, and then I decided that I would leave the hips out, and I would just integrate it in slowly and see how that would work. So I taught them all the steps, and like you saw them,
Yeah, of course. Those,
kaholo.
Yeah,
You
kaholo.
usually move your hips where hips are moving, but I taught them without the hips. So there's. That went on for several months, and then slowly every Thursday that I would get there, I would just put in the hips a little bit, and finally one of the guys said to me, "Hey, Kumu," I'm like, "What? Are we supposed to be moving our hips like that?" I said, "No, it's only for professionals. You have to be really, really talented. It takes years and years of hard work and dedication to be able to move your hips in a way that looks good." I said, I was planning not to teach you guys the hips because it's too hard. The next week I came back there, I was like, all right, game on, let's do it.
Yeah. Well, bless them. That's the hard part.
Well,
for
right,
me,
and
man,
so
I'll tell you.
that they embraced that
Yeah.
right away was really great. And even though they're not connected, a lot of them aren't Hawaiian and they're not connected to their culture. What's so amazing for me, and this is something that I've learned, is that when we say what is hula, obviously for those of us who are from Hawaii, who are Hawaiian, it is really who we are as Hawaiian. It's a deep connection to our culture. It explains who we are, right? But if you're not Hawaiian, then what? And so I watch these guys dance. They're not connected to Hawaii at all. And we don't have a lot of time for me to go over all the material, which I do here and there. But yet, what they're connected to is community. Is they have a place with each other in a room where they are valued, they're acknowledged, they're disciplined,
Right.
so they're rambunctious.
Yeah.
But it's really a turning point, like after 6 months when I'm watching them get better, I'm thinking to myself, because I train them, I have service rather,
Yeah.
once a week for 2 hours. If I had them twice a week for 2 hours, I could turn some of these guys into really, really great dancers. It was like astonishing. After a 6-month period, I'm looking at some of their faces and they're recognizing that they're getting good.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I'm developing a talent for this.
Right.
I understand how this works. And they thought that it was so much harder. I've seen it on TV. It doesn't look that hard. They thought it was much harder for them to learn than they initially thought. And being able to transcend that and to go past that and start to not master it, but get more comfortable with it. This feeling of accomplishment and pride that I see in them when they move is just, it's nothing as good as that. It's really, really great. Oh, you guys do.
What makes someone like a really great dancer? What separates the okay from the just really exceptional?
You know, that's a good question. I'm just going to say, to be really a really great dancer, you have to open yourself up. You have to expose your vulnerabilities because you can't express the dance if you aren't telling the story. If you're just telling the story in here, it's not going to take you into a place where you can really move and showcase what you're able to do with the dance. It has to go in here. And it's from here, if you're able to express that story when you're dancing, which takes a long time and it's very difficult. Yeah. Some people have a knack, like everything else. Then your movements really, because when I'm in class, I stop in the middle of my stories a lot, don't I? But when I'm in class and I'm explaining the moves to people and nobody's really smiling and expressing, and I constantly tell them is that you don't need to smile, but you can't just wear a blank canvas. We talked about what these songs mean. You have to implement a feeling for the song because whatever you wear over here or over here affects the way you move. So when people are doing this, and they're out there, if you're watching the guys and telling that story, this reflects this. But you'd be surprised there are so many people.
Oh, yeah.
And their dancing looks like that. So I'm often telling my
You know, it's funny. I never realized that, but watching Heidi dance, that's what she has. I mean, there's
Yeah.
like she's like connect. You like feel like connected with her.
And that's exactly what I just met Heidi, Malcolm's wife, but we had lunch a couple weeks ago. And Heidi is what I would call she's the quintessential tita. And the way I describe tita, they use it as an acronym now, is tough, independent, tenacious, but mostly adorable. But she is really a daughter of the islands, and you can see that in her, in who she is. So it doesn't surprise me that when she dances, that's what comes out.
Yeah.
She does a lot of work for social justice. That comes out. You know, it's so people who are in that field, who work with a lot of disadvantaged communities, you can see that comes out. Ryan does, one of my dancers. So I think it helps when you work with a community where you see they're not as advantaged as
What does like
the
a
rest of the community.
a class look like in San Quentin? I mean, you know, what do you do? What you know? How do you gather people? I mean, do you have a little poulet or?
Yes, we usually start with a pull. What's funny because they have their way of doing things, right? They start off with this chant and that, and
Our kids, by the way, think it's so weird in the mainland to not have prayers before like family gatherings.
right. Oh, that's right. No. It's true, but they had their own thing, which wasn't my thing, and I thought, well, I gotta sort of transition out of that. So I waited a long time before I would insert certain things, and eventually. So normally we start with poulet. Sometimes we don't. We sit in a circle, but you know they're. We're supposed to start at 1 o'clock, but oftentimes they get there at 1:10, 1:15. And like last week when I went to class service, a building was locked down for 3 weeks because somebody had the flu.
Yeah.
Then that building, because of somebody found a knife in a cell. You never know what you're going to get in prison. You walk into class, you're uncertain. Are they going to be here? Who's going to be here? So it's always like a roll of the dice. And you know who you can complain to? No one.
No one.
They don't care. That's the answer. It's prison.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, that has taught me to be resilient and flexible.
Yeah.
You know, but so normally we would sit down, we'd talk, we'd have a poulet, or oftentimes I'll start on. There's a whiteboard in class. I was so
that's
happy
good.
when I came in 3 weeks ago. A whiteboard,
Yeah.
no markers, but a whiteboard. So I bought my markers with me the week after, and I was starting
Brought them
teaching
in your little plastic bag.
Yeah, totally. Just no eraser. But here's what I love about the guys is that they're fearless too. It's like when I'm teaching them a chant, in like my hala, my school, people are very nervous about speaking. It's like, what is this? I'm a dance school, and now you're asking me to sing or chant. So people are normally very reticent. Oh, no, no. I'm like, louder, louder. It's like, not them. Oh, no, no. I mean, they're just flat and off pitch. But I love the exuberance and the willingness to work, because I'd rather do that than try to pull things out. I'd rather push it back in a little bit. So I love that. They just jump. They're so willing.
Yeah, that's great. Can you tell us about the Hi'iaka play you're working on right now?
I'm currently working on the epic tale of Hi'iaka Ikopolio Pele, which is a famous mo'olelo, or legend, as we say in Hawaiian, of Pele, the volcano deity, and her youngest and most favorite sister. So we're working on a play like a Broadway musical, we'll see. We have some really important backers who are from New York. Stephen Schwartz, who produced Wicked and a lot of other influential plays, is one of our dramaturgs. And right now we had to sort of shift that because we're going to take that 2-act play and make it a 1-act play on Princess Cruise Lines. And then eventually we'll go back to finishing the 2-act play.
How do you work with people like that? I mean, how do you like tell them what the heart of Hawaii is about?
Right?
You know?
Exactly. How do I? I mean, so Kili Iraisha, who's this fantastic singer and musical cultural icon, we're both working together, and he's doing the Hawaiian music.
That's great.
And we have another woman from Punahou School, Roz Katrakia, who's doing the more Broadway kind of music, because in this play is incorporating traditional chants and singing and contemporary Hawaiian music, as well as what you would hear in a Broadway play. trying to navigate this and retain the cultural integrity as best as we can has been really challenging. So that's why Keely and I are there to say, no, that wouldn't happen. That doesn't feel comfortable. That doesn't feel right. And we've been through, like, I don't know, 70-something drafts.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You know, my son talks about cultural appropriation all the time. He says that when it happens with African Americans, people kind of get it, but they
Right.
don't get, like, having a little Hawaiian hula skirt girl on the dashboard. They just don't. It's
Right.
almost like it's like Hawaiian stuff is like exempted from those
Yes.
rules.
Well, interesting because, Southwest Airlines is going to fly to Hawaii. We're
yeah,
excited about
right.
it because Hawaiian has been such a juggernaut, taking over everything.
Yeah, it's
So, right. So many lower fares.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping.
So they sent out a pictures talking about some of the officers getting ready to start their Hawaiian flight. And, of course, they're all in grass skirts.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we have work to do.
Yeah, totally. Like, my son get bugs him.
Please.
Oh, tell us more about dance culture interaction with Joffrey Ballet namesake.
Oh, we didn't have any interaction with the Joffrey Ballet. We just used their studio. So I wish, no, actually, we were very young. We weren't even a company at the time. We were just a ragtag group of people kind of interested in dancing, really, what it was. So we didn't have any interaction with Joffrey Ballet. He was just really good friends with my partner at the time.
Yeah. How did you start to doing the choreography though too? I mean, how do you get that idea, like that inspiration to create? I mean, because obviously putting parts of things together.
Right.
But I mean, how do you create things like that?
I think what's helpful is I love Hawaiian music, right? Of course, it's one of my first loves, but I also love other kinds of music.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
when to choreograph something to songs that are not Hawaiian, which is what we do, it sort of opens up different areas in the way that you create that allows you to find new ways to move your body. It's sort of inherent in the song. So that's been very helpful. And of course, I didn't do this. I didn't discover it on my own. My teacher, Robert, did it while we were students. And when I was a student for him, he would let us choreograph some pieces as well. So that's what started it. And I was like, I think that hula is just as beautiful as any other dance out there, ballet, modern dance, hip hop, and that it should be on a world stage. Everyone should see it and fall in love. You should go to Burning Man and watch us dance and have that experience. So I love to include people. I got to back up a little bit because everybody thinks, that hula is a dance which tells a story, but it's really not a dance which tells a story. The words, the poetry, or the song, that's the main vehicle of which the story is told. The dancing, the gestures that you use, the expression, it adds flavor and dimension to that. But really what tells the story, especially in traditional times, were the words. So traditional dancing is not very expansive.
Yeah.
Because when you're telling a story and you're dancing about the flower there and the rain that falls on the flower, the story is being told here, and you're hearing the story. But if I'm telling you about the rain and the flowers, that's the mountain and the birds, and it's like, well, how are you going to follow that? It becomes distracting. And so hula has become very stylized as well, and that's okay. I mean, please. But we have to remember traditionally how it was done and why it was done that way. Everybody spoke the language. Well, many people don't speak the language, especially here. So how are you supposed to convey that story just with motions? Because really it's supposed to be a multidimensional discipline, right? Because you're seeing the motions, you're hearing the words, you're hearing the chant. All of that is involved in moving you. So I noticed that, one of the numbers that people really love, which we do, I Left My Heart in San Francisco.
Oh, great.
And Roberta Flack's First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. Because people can hear and understand the poetry.
Yes, of course.
And
So
so,
they get the whole
movements make
picture.
sense. And so they get the multidimensional picture that hula was intended to originally
That is
give,
so
right?
interesting. By sticking to the tradition, by changing.
Right.
So in some ways, you're more
Yes,
true to the
exactly.
tradition because
Right.
people hear and they understand the words that they're being danced.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah.
I do believe too that we take in so much subconsciously, and I do believe gestures have way more
Yes.
to do with how we respond to a person than what
Yes.
the words
Yes.
actually are. That
Right.
you're saying.
Yeah, you're right on that account. I agree. Right.
Yeah. Okay. What was your most emotional and touching experience working at San Quentin? It's a great question.
I've had several. All right, let me. So one of the main guys who was, his name is Upu, and he started the group. Really dedicated, big Polynesian, Samoan guy, and he was in there for 26 years. I never asked him what he did, why he was there. Rough and tough, but a soft, creamy center. And he was there all the time, and he would marshal the guys. So he was getting ready to be released, and he asked me to write him a recommendation letter. And I take those very seriously. I try not to like decorate it. Oh, this guy's really great. He should be released because of blah, blah, blah. I'm very honest.
Right, completely.
Yeah,
as you
and my recommendation, as you need to be, right? So I wrote one for him, and I talked about how I was very impressed. Many things. He was the first, I guess, inmate who came up to me and said, I don't think they like the term inmate. They prefer prisoner, right? Because that's what's happening. He asked me to write that recommendation letter, and I wrote it for him. And then he told me after that, when he went to the parole board, he said that it was my recommendation letter that helped them to really see that he's made such an improvement. Right?
Wow.
Excuse me.
That's heavy.
All right. Good, I'm glad. Right.
Wow.
And then what happened, I was gone for a few weeks, and he was released.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not like you get to have a party when you're released,
Yeah,
or
no.
they tell you exactly when. It just happens.
Yeah.
There's no like goodbye ceremony, so it was so hard. I came back and was like, oh, where's Upu? Oh, it's released. It's like,
your
oh,
main
yeah.
student is gone.
Yes.
Yeah.
So but he's on to doing better things, and I'm trying to. I'm working on a project that will allow the men who have been released to continue studying with me. You know, on a irregular basis. And I would love to bring them with my guys and have my guys mentor them as well, and invite them into the community, because I want them to feel the sort of inherent aloha that is a part of our community. Everybody is accepted, no matter what.
Right.
You know,
right.
you got to contribute in your own way, but you're part of the group. You know?
Yeah, definitely. That's powerful. Do the men in San Quentin perform the hula for other residents?
Yes, yeah, they do. They have what's called a makahiki, which is their event they have every year, and they used to be able to invite outside guests, but now that's becoming difficult. So they can just invite inmates, and they're pals. They love coming. I think it's because of the free food. But no, they really enjoy the dancing, and they're very supportive of the guys who dance. And this year, I was able to bring some of my dancers in. So I had 4 of the women who came in and who danced with the guys, because they know some of the same dances as the guys, right?
Yeah.
And needless to say, that was a huge hit. People really enjoyed that.
I can imagine
and
that.
I was sort of, I'm like, these guys better behave, right? They were on their best behavior and really charming and very kind. So it was lovely to see.
I love that. So here's a little bit longer thing. Aloha, what a truly spiritual experience. To reconnect with my Hawaiian experience 31 years ago, I am curious if you know a woman named Mrs. Daniels who taught hula at the community center in Waikiki near the zoo. Her mother was present while she taught and had a reputation as one of the oldest masters at that time. I heard she passed away many years ago and given honors and accolades she deserved. I learned a couple of short and simple dances to take back into San Francisco to teach my third grade boys and girls. I was there one summer break to visit my sister. I was jealous that she lived there in the island, so full of beauty and culture. Thank you so much, Patrick. Okay, so it's not much of a question.
What's her name, Hattie? Is it?
Mrs. Daniels. Mrs. Daniels.
What's her first name? Do you remember?
I forgot.
You know, I can't think of it offhand. And do you remember her teacher's name? That's how we go. We go through the lineage.
I know
So then
completely. That's
we hit
exactly
somebody,
right. Who knows who? Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
our famous. I mean, you know, she sounds familiar, and I'm sorry that I can't quite bring a picture right now, but she does sound familiar, and I'm glad you had that opportunity. Yeah.
So we don't have very much more time because we have church at 11 o'clock. But I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the future of hula. I mean, it's really a remarkable thing that around the world there are...
Well, yes, and which in itself presents a little problem, because as it spreads out, hula is huge in Japan and even in Mexico.
Japan, right. Oh,
and there are more people dancing hula in Japan than there are in Hawaii.
Yeah.
So there's a concern about after it gets dispersed and who is going to be taking care of it.
It's kind of like surfing almost. I mean, it's just like, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you're sort of like becoming ambassadors of a culture where you really have to be careful as to what you're there's a huge issue of cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
But a lot of them study from very reputable kumus from Hawaii, and part of the finances or the economics of the situation is, that's one of the great things about us being here in California is that we are, what's the word? Funded.
Yeah.
Funded. People back home are not funded.
Yeah.
There's no arts organization that's giving anybody money. They're still selling huli huli chicken and car washes to make money. So a lot of the teachers go to Japan to teach because they get paid well and they use those fundings to finance their school.
Support just back
Right.
home.
So the future for hula is, I believe, big and bright. There are a lot of young kumu out there and people really interested in the dance who are so smart in terms of knowing their history and language that I'm really understanding and beholding and treating their traditions like family heirlooms, which there are, but at the same time, they're exploring as well. So I think that we're in great hands. Want me to end with a quick dance?
Yeah, they're great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right, come on, guys. Listen. How about 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2? Hiki. Yeah? No, pai. One time each verse, and then haina twice. Or are you stuck with 2 times? Sorry, I shouldn't be having this conversation in front of an audience, but here I am. I feel so comfortable with you. 2, 1, 1, 2. All right, okay, 2, 1, 1, 2. All right. So after that wonderful conversation, we're going to end a hula that talks about a rocking chair.
Oh, yeah.
Wish you were here with me so we could be on that rocking chair together. There you go. Hawaiians love to sit on comfortable things. Okay. Pupuem.
Pupue ihowa e mehana Hone ana o ese kuopoli.
All right, hana.
Pupue ihowa e mehana
Ahone ana o ese kuopoli. Mehe alam.
A mehe ala noe I mai ana
Au he aku ule.
Roselani Malihini, old Malihini
A malihini oe, malihini Makanos ka uala kamaina. Ina. Second one. Ina. Who? Oh, who? You. Ame ya You will be sitting on my rocking chair. Haina. Haina ia mai kapuana. Hone ana o ese kuopoli. Hey. Haina.
Haina ia mai kapuana Hone ana o ese kuopoli A kuopoli A kuopoli
Aloha. All right, thank you. All right.
It's just the way the year of the body should be. Huh?
Yeah. I agree.
Less talking and more dancing. Please join us next week. Our guest is going to be Larry Brilliant. He's the co-founder of one of the first digital social networks, the inaugural executive director of the Google Foundation, and current chair of Ending Pandemics. He was very involved in the end of smallpox in the world. I mean, he was one of the people who's on that team that ended smallpox on our planet. But we'll be talking about worldwide diseases and working toward positive change. That'll be next week. Today at the 11 o'clock service, Alan Jones will be preaching, one of the most prominent preachers in the country, and he'll be here. I'm very excited to have him. If you get a chance, you can give a gift on the way out. We have like a little credit card thing and a little box for old-fashioned money. And we're so grateful to you, Patrick.
Mahalo ya oi.
What a great day.
Thank you so much.
Mahalo nui.
Mahalo. Thank you. Aloha.